So here we are again on the Brattlecast, talking with Ken Gloss, the proprietor of a very lovely spot, a famous Boston landmark, the Brattle Bookshop on West Street in Boston. And I walk by it frequently because I live in the neighborhood, and it's impossible to walk by without stopping in or stopping out, no matter where you are. There's books on the inside and the outside. But Ken, you often talk about people who come to you with estates and collections and things like that. And you say occasionally, and this may be recently, some rather large collections. We're talking big, big numbers.
Well, people call up regularly, and one of our first questions when they say they have books, usually the reason they're selling is either they're an older couple moving from the big house to the smaller, or it's an estate, someone's died. Mm-hmm. And there's every other reason in the world, but those are the two main. And usually what we ask people first, well, how many books do you have? And the answer is a lot. And then what kind of books? And they go fiction and nonfiction, which is every book ever done. And we try to narrow it down. And it's not uncommon for people to have 200, 300, 500, even 1,000 books in your house. A lot of times people don't even realize they have that many. But, if you have bookcases here and there, there's a couple hundred in that case and a couple. And we're very used to that. A lot of times we'll tell people, send a picture of the bookcases nowadays.
So
great
easy.
way to see what it is.
Exactly.
We go out every day. But every once in a while, we get a call that isn't quite the usual. And in the last few months, we've gotten 3 or 4 or 5 people who have had, or they at least say, they'll call up and they say, we have 10,000 books. We have 15,000 books. We just moved in a state that had 20,000 books in it. And when you hear someone say that on the phone, first of all, the whole perspective changes. The first thing is, do they actually have that many books? Then the next thing we wonder about, where are the books? Are they in this area?
Yeah.
Next, can you actually see the books? Because sometimes when people have that many books in the house, literally you have to be stepping over piles, trying to look behind piles. They have things double, triple rowed. Or if you have that much stuff in the house, you have lots of other stuff in the house and sort of a hoarding situation.
I was going to ask you if that's something you've run into.
Occasionally we've run into that. And then you start to say, well, are the books consistent? In other words, are they all about the same value-wise? Are they books that the person just got because they wanted to read the books and just on and on and on? Were they a professor? And there's one particular or 2 particular subjects that they were particularly interested in. Did they collect any rare books out of the large quantities? And then the next thing is logistics. If we go out to see this, well, again, can we see them?
Right.
Then if we do buy them, how do you move them? Where do you put them? How do you deal with it?
Yeah, I'm thinking right off the bat, are you going to walk up a tenement? Do I have to walk up 3 flights to get there? Or?
Absolutely. That runs into it. And then another thing that you run into is if they do have some rare books, are those 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 books more valuable than the other 5,000 or 10,000 or so on? In other words, is there 1 or 2 things in this? And we just finished doing a deal. Now, they didn't have as many. They only had about 4,000 or 5,000 books. But the deal was, and this is something that comes up, is they said, okay, we know these 3 or 4 books are really the valuable ones. But if you want these 3 or 4 books, we want the house cleaned out. We don't want to deal with books after this. So part of when we were working up a bid, it wasn't just, okay, we'll pay this much for these books, is do we subtract or do we add for the other books? And in this case, we figured it was about neutral. So we made a bid on essentially the 3 books. The people knew that was what we were bidding on, but they also knew that part of the deal for them was they didn't have to deal with books when we were done.
So when you're visiting a place that says we've got thousands, and you don't really know what they have because they haven't been specific. Is it a little bit like sifting for gold nuggets? You got to kind of launch a search through the pile?
A little bit sifting through nuggets, but also it's a little bit sampling. Because sometimes the books are in boxes or they can't all be seen.
Yeah, just too many.
And so what you do is you'll open a box, you'll move 5 boxes to get to one that's not next to the one you just opened, and you look in and you start pulling books out and looking fairly closely, seeing what the subjects, the condition is very important, what area the person was in, what they were likely to have. And if you go through 10 or 15 or 20 boxes, and they're all generally the same type of book, the same value, well, then you start saying, okay, there's 50 boxes, 100 boxes. You ask the person, do you know if there's anything in here that's going to skew it? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but they usually don't just have those books in the boxes mixed in. And then you make an estimate just on that. And going through those books, there might be one that you open a box and they're damaged, it's not good. There might be one where there's a book that maybe is worth more than the average book, but not anything to skew it. So you do it that way. Where the hard part is, and actually the more fun, is if you start opening these boxes and there are actually rare books in some of them, then you have to open every box and go through everything. And what you maybe could do sometimes in half an hour might take a week, because you've got to be really careful because you're talking about valuable things, high-priced money. And usually when that happens, people know they have it. But if they're dealing with an estate of a relative or a friend, they might not know. The next thing that comes into it, we bought a library of a professor from Brandeis who wrote American history. Mm-hmm. Literally, he had 20,000 books in the house.
Wow.
Now, the books were fairly well on shelves all through the whole house. But when we were considering what we would pay, we figured, okay, how much time do we have to move this? Because if the people had said to us, this has to be out in 2 days, even though we wanted to buy the books, it was just would have been physically impossible. They said, the real estate want to get this on the market. They want to have the books out of here because it won't look great to the people looking at the books. But they're not going to do that for a month. So I said, okay, if we have a month, and then the next thing is, do we have access? And they had one of those little lock boxes on the front door. Mm-hmm. They said, nobody's living here, but yeah, just this is the code to the lock.
By the way, you say we. Let's talk about the SEAL Team 6 approach here. It's not just you, obviously. You're a very fit guy, but how many folks do you bring with you in a job like that?
If we're doing it one truckload at a time, and I have a pickup truck that holds about 2,000 books, then I either bring one person with me or two. Usually you can fill up a truck, but before we made the bid on this one, the manager at the store, she called around to storage areas near the house.
Makes sense, because where are you going to put all these books, even though you have a lot of space?
It wasn't even where are we going to put them in the store, but we said if we have a storage area close by, maybe we can do 2 trucks or 3 in a day.
Makes sense.
Whereas if we had to drive into downtown Boston each time and unload, you could probably only do 1. So how much does it cost for the storage areas? In this case, we use 2 storage areas, but one of the things we always do when we do that, we budgeted the store. Okay, this storage area has to be empty in 3 months. This one has to be empty in 9 months because you're paying $300 or $400 a month.
I know, I've had them. Yeah.
So that gets factored in. Are the books in good condition? Are the subjects a good area? A lot in this one particular one, some of the history was older British history, which doesn't sell well. Mm-hmm. Those will probably go out on our outside tables. But then he had a lot of books on American Civil War, American Revolution. Those will sell better. He didn't have any rare books. In other words, probably the most expensive book out of the 20,000 was maybe $100. Most of them. So you build all that in. But that can be fun. I just went to a house this morning before we're doing this, and it was a book dealer. Now, the problem with book dealers is they usually sell the best books. And they also will sometimes say, this book's worth $100, this is worth $25, I have this one online at $200. And I'm looking at it and saying, well, first of all, you didn't sell it because it's still here. Second of all, the reason you get this extra money is because you put a lot of time and effort into pricing, selling, packaging, working. Nowadays, you pay employees $20, $25 an hour. If they spend an hour on a book, no, the price needs to be lower. You've got to do it at a price you can sell. And sometimes it's very hard to convince someone who's done the work. And we've also had cases, this one's a year ago, where someone said, my cousin has 500 books. There are some good sporting books, some good travel books. Get to the house, there are 20,000 books. And so all of this goes into it, and it can be fascinating. Another place we went to in Albany, New York, they had 30,000 books, but a lot of them were these old paperbacks. And the reason the person bought it, they were an artist, but they loved the cover illustrations. And quite honestly, on those old paperbacks, that's what sells them. Now, if you go into a house and you're buying rarer books, you can sort of tell if you're making money because, okay, we sold that book for this, we sold that book for this. But when you're buying 20,000, 30,000 books, a lot of times, we never know how much money we're going to make. We never know when we're going to make it. We just know that they're going to sell.
It's important to remember that in your case, particularly, it's a constant cycle. You're constantly getting requests to come out and buy books or look at books and then sell books, so it's never ending.
But what's happening, I think, also is that there are less and less general used bookstores. So on these large lots, there aren't that many places that if you say you have that many books that will even go out and look.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing construction at the store right now, and it is a building in Boston. It's a 3-story building, but for downtown commercial building, it's small. We had a horrible time trying to get people even come and bid. I have a feeling in some cases with people when they have a library that large that isn't millions of dollars, they have a lot of trouble even getting somebody to go out and look. And of course, unless you're dealing with a fairly big operation, just the work involved, the amount of exercise. Now, the one thing we did do when you asked how many people go out in this one that we just got 20,000 books in, most of the books were on the first floor. So when we did the first floor, 2 people were fine. But there were a few thousand on the second floor and a few thousand in the basement. When I did those, I brought 4 people.
Who knew that being in the world of books was manual labor intensive?
It's incredible, and you can't have allergies to dust, mold, and mildew. But who knew that there's that many people out there that have that many books? But again, it's the treasure hunt. It's the fun. It's also the mental process you go through. Okay, logistics start getting. How much does it cost to move them? What's the gas if they're a further distance? Where are you going to store them? How much is that going to cost? Are there any of the books that, because they were in back shelves or bottoms, that are damaged that you might have to take but just get rid of? Are there 1 or 2 things that will make the deal? And how flexible are the people? Like when you get near the end, if there's a few hundred books left and you have to make it, will they give you and say, look, don't worry about it. You got 19,800 of them out a year, fine and good. Do they have a limit on how long you can take? The other thing is, are there contractors going to be working there while you're trying to move? Or are there antique dealers and movers? Is everybody going to get in everybody's way? Do you have to adjust for that? So a simple thing, selling a library, can be very simple and it can be very involved. Or sometimes that many books, you say, can I pick and choose? Now, a lot of times that's not what people want to hear, but sometimes they go, do you have someone who can take them? Is there a charity? Is there a book sale? And sometimes we can help arrange that end of it and make it a little easier on us and then the people still get the
A
books
look
out.
behind the scenes, behind the bookshelf as to what really goes on. And there really is a lot of coordination and logistics involved. And
And a lot of muscle power. and that you make sure you bring a lot of water so you can drink,
Right.
That you bring an extra T-shirt or something if you sweat through it. We actually tell employees, this day, make sure you bring some changes because you might sweat through your clothes.
You've got the healthiest crew in Boston. Let's face it, they're all fit as fiddles.
We have one employee that we just hired who does mixed martial art fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And he said on some of the buys here, it's been harder training to do these buys than it is preparing for a fight.
Well, it's a fight worth fighting. Ken Gloss, thank you as always for sharing your bio. Every day is an exciting day at the store, and when you're out on adventures, it's exciting. So thank you.
People ask me, I'm getting a little older now, am I going to retire? And my wife says I'll retire 3 days after I die. And I hope that's a long way off.
It's a long way off. And I'm the same way. I don't want to stop doing what I'm doing. Come on.
I don't know what else I'd do. But it's also fun, enjoyable, and you meet wonderful people.
Yeah, and then you can read anything you want that you pick up, too. That's
exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to the Brattlecast. We'll be back with more episodes and more fun. You can guarantee that.